We live inside of our thoughts, repeating our interpretation of our reality over and over and over again until we find peace. The first time I came to this realization that I live inside my mind, inside my thoughts, either in a memory of something in the past or an imagination of something in the future. It literally took my breath away. I never looked at my body as the wonderful thing that it is. You know, this absolutely amazing biological entity, pattern recognition machine that is responsible for absolutely everything. What are we without bodies? Everything we do is because of our bodies. Everything. The pain we go through, trauma processing, we go through that in order to make our bodies stop hurting. Our reward systems, our feel-good systems, all of this we do in order to give our body some sort of feeling. Or, of course, the other side is to get away from some sort of feeling, which is avoidance. I've spoken about that many, many times. Access. It all has to do with access. Why do we get stuck in our minds? We get stuck in our minds because our body is either experienced something so tragic and high intensity in the past that it controls us. That feeling is in our nervous system, and every single time something happens in our environment or in our minds that reinitiates that feeling, it just drops us straight back into our body immediately. It's a terrible, terrible place when it's like that. I've been depressed in my life, and I work with many people who are, and this is how we all describe it. Being a prisoner in our bodies, not being able to shake this darkness, this cloud inside of us. When the link between what our body is experiencing and how our mind interprets that is not healthy, then we don't have access to the information to tell us what is happening in our body. We just feel the completely unfiltered, uncut version of those emotions. Of course, it's easier to just try and run away from that shit because it hurts. It hurts. Let's talk about this. Where does it come from? What can we do about this? What can we do in order to re-establish, bit by bit, slowly, the connection between how our mind reinterprets what our body is still hanging on to? Let's talk about why that is there in the first place. A good starting point is, what do we really know? So ask yourself this question. Maybe pause the video, get a pen and paper, or even just think aloud. What do you really know? Why do you know that? Where does it come from? We make it simple. We are pattern recognition machines, right? Our sense stimuli is the information perceived from our environments that goes into our body. Our body does not have the individual capacity to translate for our mind what is happening here. So we still have to always update that library in our mind here. The words and the concepts and the terminology and the linguistic aspects to decipher what it is that we're feeling. So if you break it down into its baseline elements, what do we know? We know what happens in the environments. We know what happens in our minds. Why do we know this? We know this because we have bodies, because of how we're designed. Then we also know something else which really messes around a lot of people. Our memories. We know our memories. We remember all the things that we have been through. The things that are happy, the things that are sad, the things that are light, the things that are dark, the things that we use, the things that we cannot let go of. Our memories. Then there's the imagination. Everything we might still want. Places we want to go, people we want to meet, things we want to see, things we want to create and achieve. Past, future, here. Then there's the subconscious work. All of our automatic patterns. The things that we have either consciously or unconsciously practiced for such a long time that they have become completely automated. So if we bring it down to its three baseline levels, this is the three sources. My body, everything that happens in here, and then everything that happens in the lower levels in there. Next, I have my note here. Right. Once we establish this, okay, how we know what we know, why we know what we know, there's a very important factor to consider. Something that we always neglect to look at. Every single person on this planet has their own specialized, experience-based subconscious filter. Right? There's a filter inside every single one of us that helps us to translate our experience, that helps us to translate the world, that helps us to make sense of the world. And it's subjective because every single person has their own. Right? Think about relationships, if I just quickly run with my minds. Why is it that there is conflict in majority of relationships? Right? Even the good ones have probably learned what I'm about to say. Conflict in a relationship stems from aversion conflict of this translation mechanism. Because I have my right, the other person have their rights, but we have not yet come together to create a right for us. So the consequence of this is, until you agree with me, I can't be right because I have to defend my version of rights. And I won't agree with you because that goes against my rights. And then you turn it around and the exact same thing happens. This is because we don't take into consideration that everybody really has their own translation tool that they use to interpret all of this. This can be overcome, sticking with relationships, with very clear communication rules, right? Communication is important, really important. I'll probably make another video at a later stage about communication specifically, because that is really what gets you through the day. So all the information we have and how we translate it comes from this subconscious, what are we going to call it? Let's call it a filter, a translation filter. That filter has a switch, okay, an on and off switch. That on and off switch, if we really look at it, it has two settings. Me or we, okay? Either I think about everything that I'm experiencing, how it affects me, for various reasons we'll go into a bit later. Or alternatively, what we do is I think of everything I'm experiencing in terms of how does it affect us. right? So the one is really altruistic, observer, philanthropic, stuff like that. Some people will argue, like Carl Jung, this is what self-realization is, realizing that, okay, yeah, it's fucking not just me on this planet. Everything I do is connected to everything else and everybody else. That's totally up for discussion. So if you have ideas about that, or I just triggered something in your own mind, please, I'd love a good discussion. Leave a comment and let me know what you think. Why do we, majority of the case, revert to the me filter, right? The me switch. Various reasons. Okay, the most obvious, like in my line of work, trauma. Unresolved, unintegrated trauma. What trauma does is, coming back to the top point then again, is it leaves all of these unprocessed emotions and feelings and experiences in our actual nervous system. So we want to know what the hell, problem is we've never updated that link, so we don't have the translations to actually define and tell ourselves what it is. Now this is just on the trauma side of it, right? But there's many other reasons as well. Reasons like fitting in, okay? Social norms, not fitting in. I mean, especially, and I want to say the younger generation, right? But I still see myself as 23, even though I'm like in my 40s already. But with the internet today, the competition to get belonging has become so ridiculous that the filter that most people use is me. How we dress, how we talk, where we go, what we do, what we buy, what we eat. All of those things start off, in majority of the cases, by emulating an outside behavior. What does the world say I have to be in order to achieve A, B, and C, in order to feel A, B, and C, in order to accomplish A, B, and C? Translate that, what do I have to do according to the world in order to belong? Right? A very, very serious, but also very messed up. Because our birthright is that we belong. Every single one of us belong on this planet. This place belongs to all of us, not just this few, to every single person. Let's go on. How do we change these filters? Once we've gone through this process I'm describing, of recognizing I've been repeating certain things for most of my life, these translations have never been updated. You come to a stage where you realize, okay, the pain is just becoming too much. Then we go, okay, yeah, what can I do? Okay. You come across a video on YouTube of this guy with this strange accent and playing with a pen, getting momentary outbursts of energy, telling you, okay, yeah, it's because you never updated the information that you're repeating constantly. Saying that, okay, yeah, if you update this information, maybe you might see your own experience in a different light. But how do we do this? Awareness is number one. Always. Practice becoming aware of not just what you think, but the experience your body is going through. Right? For me personally, I like in the morning, first thing, go outside, find a place to sit and just stay quiet. I can just sit there and, without interfering, feel, well, how is my body? What is going on? What is my digestive system doing? Is my stomach upset? Is my back sore? Is my shoulder sore? You physically feel. And then you go to the other side. Okay, what's happening in my mind? Marcel, are you continuing to think about the thing that you thought about last night before you go to bed? This is a difficult thing to say. Or are you straight away thinking about what you want to do today, or what is happening inside of you? Just observe it, right? Observe it. Do not interact with it. Sit there inside quiet and just watch it. This is the very first thing. By going through this process, we develop ability to identify the things that we have been repeating over and over again. Right, and majority of the cases, I think studies at the moment, Joe Dispenza studies are changing, okay, constantly. You guys watching this, you will know that. The first studies, like up until 5-6 years ago, is that we do between 60 and 80,000 thoughts every 24 hours. Recent studies have come out saying that between 6 and 7,000 thoughts. Personally, I think 6 and 7 is a bit more realistic, all right? Because how the hell did they count between 60 and 80,000 thoughts per se, and especially if it's subconsciously? How do you measure that, right? But this can also be a reflection of my lack of knowledge in this very particular research area. So do not quote me, okay? I admit that. I'm still learning always, and so should you. So become aware. This is the first thing. Once you become aware that you can actually just observe your internal environments as well as here and here, what you can do is you can actually focus on what you are repeating the most. Now, this is a simple exercise of pattern recognition, right? You get a pen and paper, or you get an app on your phone where you do a voice recording. And every time you find yourself repeating the same thing, you take a note of it and you actually write down or you record what is the subject that you have been repeating. You'd be very surprised of the amount of stuff that you repeat. Massively. Now remember, within context, we only have a finite amount of processing space. We only have a finite amount of energy. 20% of the energy we use already goes to our brain, just to maintain it at a specific temperature. A lot more goes to our digestive system. A lot more goes into actual movements, right? So at the end of it, we are left with a very, I don't know what percentage, all right, but I can imagine that it must be 50 or less to actually think about the stuff. Now, if we use the larger percentage of that in order to repeat what we have already been repeating, how much does that leave us for new processing? Not a lot, right? Not a lot. What's the next step? You've got awareness. You become mindful of what you are repeating and what you have been repeating. Then you go into the why. Because just saying I'm going to stop the things that I'm repeating is not enough. Okay? We work in open loops, which means our minds wants to know what it is it's thinking about. And until it finds a resolution that is clear enough in order for it to let go and make peace of that so that it can categorize it, it will not let it go. So the why is really, really important. Why can be broken into many different categories. Once again, my area, trauma. Unresolved, unprocessed, unintegrated trauma. Can be environmental factors, social norms. What if you grew up in a village or a town or a nationality or a race that tells you you have to be like this? But deep inside you go, I'm not like that. What do you think that causes? That causes this engine inside of you that just starts and wants to fight. But how do you stand up against this? How? So you internalize this repeat process. And you start living inside it. I don't wish this on anybody. I don't understand. Why can't I just be me? You start living in this imagination, stuck in your body, right? Because this is not being processed. That faculty that we need, self-expression, in order to belong, not just to the world, but to ourselves, that is never being exercised. That's just one example. One example. In my own experience, all the things that we still attach ourselves to is probably a good way of putting it. All of the unresolved emotions and feelings and thoughts, all of the things that chain us to our bodies, all of these things come from one of 4 sources. This is if we break it down completely. Our first need as a human being is always going to be survival. Always. Doesn't matter what age you are. But in your primary years, it's more important than in your formative years. Alright? Because a child and a toddler and a baby cannot look after themselves. So safety and security will always be the very first human needs in order to be met. One of the most beautiful ways I've ever come across where anybody said this is they posed the question, what's easier, to think with a full stomach or an empty stomach? If your stomach is so empty that it's starting to talk to you, you're not going to think about amazing theories and places to go and things to do. You're going to think about, what the hell can I do to just make this go away? I need to eat. This is how powerful our bodies are. If we don't look after these babies, this one will never be free. Never, ever, ever. So it's a joint job. They work together. That's the first. The second need is belonging. Like we already said, belonging is massively important, especially today. Today, because of the internet and mass communication availability, right? Yeah, I think you can probably come up with your own examples of how important that is. Going back into history as well, there's a really important sense for it, because belonging was directly linked to our need for survival. So, going back, if we were not in groups, our chances of survival was much less than if we were single, alone, nomadic, or what's the term? If we weren't in a group, let's just turn it around. All right, it's always been like that. Today, this is just being translated into I need to fit in, but it's really still linked to the same genetic build-up, the same genetic need, right? That 1% of us that is already coded DNA that tells us, Marcel, this is where this body comes from yonders. This is still the things that are so important that without them you will not survive. This is how deeply ingrained it is in us. Once we've met primary safety and security and belonging, we will always go to the next step, self-expression. Right? Because we live in a world that is extraordinary. We live in a place where we need to talk about this. I was reading an article about a monk, teacher monk, who brought student monk with him on a morning walk. The exercise was to stay silent. He could not talk. Whatever he experienced, he was not supposed to talk. Reason for this was in order to practice being an observer internally. So, of course, monk woke up really, really early, got the student monk. They went for a walk in this beautiful mountain valley. The timing was just perfect for the sun to come up. The moment the sun's rays hit the student monk in the face, he was so awestruck, he couldn't help himself. He said, "Oh my, look how beautiful this is." Now, this is how powerful our sense of belonging and self-expression is. Right? It's a human need to share what we think, what we feel, what we experience. This is why our environment is so incredibly important. Because if you find yourself in an environment that actually prohibits you from expressing yourself, that shit is unhealthy. All right? It's unhealthy. It's a need in order to express ourselves. Whether it's right or wrong, at the beginning stages of it, it does not really make a difference at all, because we've already addressed every single person walks around with this subjective filter, this processing filter inside of our own minds. But unless we get it out, we just repeat it inside. Once we get it out, we can start focusing on how many times have I been repeating it. Do I want to change it? Does it fit in? How can I update it? How do I adapt and adopt different points of views? This is down the line. But first is the self-expression. The fourth part then of this ladder. Once you've met 1, 2, and 3, you see automatically that filter, the me and we, it switches down. It goes from me to we. Because then all of your individual needs as a human being have been met. Once they've been met, an amazing thing happens. We open up for everything around us. And we start seeing and recognizing that, oh my God, this is about all of us. This is our need for social philanthropy. We automatically start to make things better around us, wherever we are. There's one very simple practice that I always give as homework to my clients in order to help new information come in. Okay, because really what this whole talk in this video is about is the more we repeat what we already have been repeating, the more we stay the same. So if we want to start changing, we have to become aware and conscious of the things we've been repeating for most of the time. And then we have to find a way of not only understanding why we've been doing it, where does it come from, but also how do we change it. The simplest way I have found to do this is to listen more than what you speak. Simple as that. Listen more than what you speak. If we speak, we don't learn anything. We just repeat over and over and over again. But when we listen, there's a chance. Even though we don't agree with what we're experiencing and hearing and listening to and observing, this is a chance that you might get new information from your environment that will be the key that you need to put all of these internal things into a bigger, greater category that will help you update that translation that you have been stuck to all your life, to give you a new experience and perception, a new translation. We live inside our own thoughts, repeating our own interpretations of reality over and over again. We do this until we finally find peace. Take care.